I am Marlene, and I've spent 34 years being the family disappointment. Not because I'm a criminal or a drug addict, mind you. My crime was far worse in my parents' eyes. I chose to build something meaningful instead of following their prescribed path of mediocrity, wrapped in respectability. While my sister Brielle glided through life collecting participation trophies and praise for showing up, I was in the corner sketching building layouts on napkins and dreaming of skylines. Real estate development wasn't just my career choice, it was my obsession. I saw potential where others saw problems, profit where others saw risk. But to my family, I was just the weird kid who played with blueprints instead of dolls. My parents, Harold and Donna, had very specific ideas about success. Harold sold insurance with the enthusiasm of someone reading an obituary, and Donna taught third grade with the same energy. They wanted safe, predictable children who would give them safe, predictable grandchildren in safe, predictable suburbs. Brielle delivered exactly that. A teaching degree she never used, a husband who manages a mid-tier sporting goods store, and 2 kids whose greatest accomplishment is perfect attendance. Then there's me, the one who asked too many questions, dreamed too big, and had the audacity to think I could build something extraordinary. Every family gathering was a referendum on my life choices, with Harold shaking his head about risky business ventures and Donna sighing about how I was still unmarried and playing with houses. But here's what they didn't know. I wasn't playing anymore. While they were busy dismissing my passion as a phase, I had quietly built something that would make their heads spin. The phone call I received 3 weeks ago changed everything, and I never imagined it would come at the exact moment my family decided to show their true colors. Before I tell you how my own blood relatives tried to steal the penthouse I bought with my own sweat and vision, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. The thing about being the black sheep is that you develop a thick skin early. Every Christmas, every birthday, every random Tuesday phone call became an opportunity for my family to remind me that I was doing life wrong. When I bought my first duplex at 26 with money I'd saved from 3 jobs, Harold called it throwing good money after bad. When I flipped it for a 30% profit 6 months later, Donna said I was just lucky the market was good. Meanwhile, Brielle's every sneeze was treated like a Nobel Prize announcement. When she got her teaching degree, they threw a party. When she got engaged to Derek, a man whose personality could cure insomnia, they acted like she'd secured world peace. When she had kids, you'd think she was the first woman in history to reproduce. I stopped expecting fairness around my 28th birthday. That was the year I closed my first major commercial deal, a strip mall renovation that netted me more money than Harold made in 2 years. I called to share the news, practically vibrating with excitement, and Donna's response was, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Brielle made Teacher of the Month?" That's when I realized I was fighting a rigged game. No matter what I accomplished, I would always be the consolation prize in their eyes. So I stopped playing for their approval and started playing for something bigger. My own vision of what success could look like. I threw myself into real estate with the fury of someone who had something to prove. Not to them, but to myself. I studied market trends like they were sacred texts. I networked with developers, architects, and city planners. I learned to read zoning laws like poetry and spot undervalued properties like a bloodhound detecting scent. While Brielle was posting Instagram photos of her perfectly mediocre life, I was building an empire. Quietly, deliberately, and with absolutely no intention of sharing the glory with people who had never believed it. The pattern started early, and looking back, I can trace my family's selective blindness to a science. I was 12 when I won the regional math competition, beating kids from schools with 3 times our budget. I came home with a trophy taller than my forearm and a certificate signed by the state education board. Harold glanced up from his crossword puzzle, said, "Good job, kiddo," and went back to 7 across. That same week, Brielle made the middle school cheerleading squad. Not varsity, middle school. The celebration lasted 3 days. Donna called every relative within a 50-mile radius. Harold bought a cake, and they hung her acceptance letter on the refrigerator like it was the Constitution. My trophy went on a shelf in my bedroom where it collected dust next to my other invisible accomplishments. High school was more of the same. I started a tutoring business that earned me enough money to buy my first car, a beat-up Honda that I paid for entirely myself. I was 16 and already understanding profit margins, client retention, and basic business operations. When I proudly announced my financial independence at dinner, Donna's response was lukewarm approval, followed by 20 minutes of gushing about how Brielle had been asked to prom by the quarterback's cousin. Isn't that wonderful? Donna practically sang, cutting another slice of cake that materialized whenever Brielle breathed. Marlene, you should take notes. Maybe if you focused less on numbers and more on being social, you'd have dates too. I wanted to point out that I was literally running a profitable business as a teenager, but I'd learned that defending myself only made them double down on the dismissal. Instead, I smiled and nodded while mentally calculating how many tutoring sessions it would take to afford the business courses I wanted to take that summer. College was where the favoritism reached Olympic levels. I earned a full academic scholarship to study business and economics, covering tuition, room, and board. You'd think that would warrant some acknowledgement, considering Harold was always complaining about money. Instead, the family celebration that year was reserved for Brielle getting into the local state school, with no scholarship, no honors, just standard admission that any breathing human with a C average could achieve. We're so proud of both our college girls, Donna would tell people, as if our paths were remotely equivalent. I was at a prestigious university on merit, while Brielle was at State College 47, because it was 15 minutes from home, and offered a program in elementary education that she'd chosen because kids are cute. The real kicker came during my junior year. I had landed an internship with one of the city's top development firms, unpaid, but with the kind of learning opportunity that would shape my entire career. I was working 60-hour weeks, soaking up knowledge about zoning laws, construction management, and investment strategies. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and I was finally seeing the blueprint for my future take shape. Meanwhile, Brielle was struggling through her student teaching, calling home every night to complain about how hard it was to manage 28 eight-year-olds. Fair enough. Teaching is tough, but the family response was drastically different. My internship was nice experience, while Brielle's basic completion of required coursework was treated like she was single-handedly revolutionizing education. You should see how the children respond to her, Donna would beam to anyone who'd listen. She's a natural. Teaching is her calling. I wanted to scream that development was my calling, that I was already thinking 3 moves ahead on deals that wouldn't close for years, that I could walk through a derelict building and see exactly how to transform it into something profitable and beautiful. But passion only counted when it fit their narrow definition of respectable. The worst part wasn't the lack of recognition, it was the active dismissal. When I graduated summa cum laude and immediately got a job with a regional development company, Harold's comment was, "Well, let's see how long this phase lasts." When Brielle barely graduated and took a substitute teaching position, they acted like she'd been appointed Secretary of Education. Every family gathering became a recap of Brielle's amazingly ordinary life, punctuated by polite questions about whether I was still doing the building thing. They said it like I was playing with Legos instead of learning to orchestrate million-dollar projects. I kept thinking they'd come around when the results became undeniable. Surely when I bought my first property, when I renovated it, when I sold it for a significant profit, they'd have to acknowledge that maybe I knew what I was doing. I was wrong. Success, it turns out, only counts when it comes in a package they recognize. The moment I decided to stop seeking their approval was oddly liberating. I was 28, sitting in my cramped apartment after another family dinner where my latest project, a successful duplex flip, had been dismissed as lucky timing, while Brielle's news about switching to organic milk for her toddler received a standing ovation. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to build something so undeniably successful that even they couldn't minimize it, and I was going to do it in complete secrecy. The aha moment came 3 months later, when I spotted a neglected commercial property downtown. Most people saw a crumbling eyesore, broken windows, overgrown parking lot, the kind of place that screamed, "Tear me down." But I saw potential wrapped in peeling paint and structural issues that were fixable with the right vision and enough capital. The building was a former textile factory from the 1920s, solid bones buried under decades of neglect. The location was perfect, walking distance from the university, close enough to downtown for young professionals, but just far enough out that the price hadn't skyrocketed. I could see luxury loft apartments, ground floor retail space, maybe even a rooftop garden. It would take everything I had and then some, but it could be the project that changed my entire trajectory. The struggle was immediate and relentless. I spent 6 months just getting financing, jumping through hoops that would have made a circus performer dizzy. Banks looked at my age, my gender, and my relatively modest portfolio and saw risk. I heard no. More times than I could count, each rejection stinging, but also fueling my determination to prove them wrong. I worked 3 jobs to keep money flowing while I pursued the financing. Days at my regular development firm job, evenings doing freelance property consulting, weekends managing the rental properties I already owned. I was living on 4 hours of sleep and gas station coffee, but every rejection letter only made me more determined. During family dinners, they'd ask about my little real estate hobby, while I smiled and gave vague answers about staying busy. If they only knew I was orchestrating the largest project of my career, while they worried about whether I was eating enough vegetables. The breakthrough came when I connected with Rosa Martinez, a private lender who specialized in overlooked properties with high potential. She looked at my business plan, walked through the building with me, and saw the same vision I did. "This could be special," she said. And those 4 words were worth more than every dismissive comment my family had ever made. The renovation took 18 months of controlled chaos. I project managed every detail, from the structural reinforcements that would preserve the building's character to the modern amenities that would attract high-end tenants. I learned more about construction, permits, and urban planning than any business school could have taught me. While my family assumed I was still flipping the occasional duplex, I was transforming a forgotten piece of the city into something extraordinary. The Marlowe Lofts, yes, I named it after myself, because why not, became a 30-unit complex with commercial space on the ground floor and penthouses that offered stunning city views. But here's the part that still gives me chills. It worked beyond my wildest projections. The units leased before construction was even finished. The waiting list grew to over 200 potential tenants. The commercial spaces attracted a trendy coffee shop, a boutique fitness studio, and an art gallery that brought the whole neighborhood to life. The financial returns were staggering. My initial investment of everything I owned, plus significant borrowed capital, paid for itself within the first year. By the end of year 2, I was clearing more profit annually than Harold had made in his entire career. I had officially become what my industry calls a major player, with other developers calling me for advice and city planners seeking my input on zoning decisions. But I told my family none of this. During holiday dinners, I'd smile and nod when they asked if I was still playing around with houses, never mentioning that I was fielding calls from investors who wanted to partner on projects worth tens of millions. The secret success was intoxicating, but it was also isolating. I was proud of what I'd built, but I couldn't share it with the people who were supposed to be closest to me. Every family gathering became an exercise in calculated understatement, watching them celebrate Brielle's mundane achievements while sitting on news that would have redefined their understanding of success entirely. I told myself I was protecting the project from their negativity, but honestly, I was also protecting myself. After decades of dismissal, I wasn't ready to hand them another opportunity to minimize my accomplishments. This was mine, and I intended to keep it that way until I was ready to reveal it on my own terms. 3 years after the Marlowe Loft's success, I had expanded into a full development portfolio that most people only dream about. I owned properties across 3 states, had a team of 12 employees, and was fielding acquisition offers that would have set me up for life. But as far as my family knew, I was still dabbling in real estate and living in the same modest apartment I'd rented in my 20s. In reality, I'd been living in the penthouse of my latest project for 8 months, a luxury high-rise I'd developed in the heart of downtown. The irony wasn't lost on me that I owned the building where I lived, had designed every detail of my 3,000-square-foot corner unit, and could see the entire city from my floor-to-ceiling windows. While they pitied my struggling lifestyle, I was literally living above the clouds. The annual family dinner was approaching, our traditional October gathering that I'd been dreading for weeks. Usually, these events followed a predictable script. Harold would ask if I was still messing around with buildings. Donna would wonder aloud when I was going to settle down and find a nice man. And Brielle would regale us with stories about her children's genius-level ability to finger paint or tie their shoes. This year felt different, though. The phone calls leading up to the dinner had an odd urgency to them. Donna had called 3 times to confirm I was coming, which was unusual since I never missed these mandatory family performances. Brielle had been unusually chatty during our last conversation, asking specific questions about my living situation and whether I was happy with my current apartment. "You know, Marlene," she'd said with that particular tone she used when she was building up to something, "Derek and I have been talking about upgrading our living situation. The kids are getting bigger, and we really need more space. Maybe somewhere with a nice view." I'd brushed off the comment as Brielle's typical grass is greener thinking. She and Derek lived in a perfectly adequate suburban house with 4 bedrooms and a 2-car garage, the kind of place most people would kill for. But Brielle had always believed she deserved better than what she had, especially if someone else seemed to be doing well. The morning of the dinner, I stood in my penthouse kitchen making coffee and looking out at the skyline I'd helped shape. 3 of the buildings visible from my window were projects I'd either developed or consulted on. In the distance, I could see the Marlowe lofts, still fully occupied with a waiting list that hadn't shrunk in 2 years. My phone buzzed with another text from Donna. "So excited to see you tonight! Where's something nice? We have exciting news to share." Something about that message made my stomach clench. My family didn't typically have exciting news that didn't involve Brielle in some way. Either she was pregnant again, or Derek had gotten a promotion at the sporting goods store, or one of the kids had accomplished something that would be treated like a medical breakthrough. I chose my outfit carefully. Nice enough to meet Donna's standards, but not so nice that it would prompt questions about where I was getting money for designer clothes. The truth was, I could have afforded to buy the entire boutique, but I'd learned to dress down for family events to avoid uncomfortable conversations about my finances. As I was getting ready to leave, I got a call from my assistant, Kevin, about a potential acquisition that had just hit the market. A developer in Phoenix was liquidating assets, and one of their properties was exactly the kind of mixed-use complex I'd been looking for to expand our Southwest presence. "The asking price is $12 million, Kevin said, "but I think we could get it for 10 if we move fast. Should I set up a call with their team?" "Absolutely," I said, checking my watch. "Schedule it for tomorrow morning. If the numbers work, we might want to move on this quickly." It struck me, as I hung up the phone, how surreal my double life had become. In 30 minutes, I'd be sitting at my parents' dining room table, being lectured about my lack of ambition, while fielding $10 million acquisition opportunities on my phone. But that was my choice. I'd built this empire in secret, and I intended to keep it that way until I was ready to reveal it on my own terms. What I didn't know, as I locked my penthouse door and headed toward what I assumed would be another routine evening of family disappointment, was that my parents and sister had been having their own private conversations about my future, and their plans for my life were about to collide spectacularly with the reality of what I'd actually built. I arrived at my parents' house precisely on time, a habit drilled into me since childhood. Though punctuality had never earned me the same praise, it did when Brielle showed up 20 minutes late, with traffic as an excuse. Harold answered the door wearing his best cardigan, the one Donna made him save for special occasions. which immediately confirmed that tonight was going to be more than their usual passive-aggressive dinner theater. "Marlene, right on time as always," he said, giving me the kind of hug that felt more like a pat on the back. Come in, your mother's been cooking all day." The house smelled like Donna's famous pot roast, which she only made when she wanted to butter someone up or deliver bad news. Given that it was a Tuesday in October and nobody's birthday, I was leaning toward the latter. Brielle and Derek were already stationed in the living room, looking unusually formal for a family dinner. Derek had traded his usual polo shirt for an actual button-down, and Brielle was wearing a dress that looked suspiciously like something she'd wear to a job interview. "Marlene!" Brielle jumped up with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for winning lottery tickets. "You look so pretty. I love what you've done with your hair." I hadn't done anything with my hair, which meant she was either being sarcastic or working up to something. With Brielle, both were equally possible. "Thanks," I said, settling into the armchair that had become my spot over the years. The one farthest from the television and closest to the kitchen, perfect for quick escapes when the conversation became unbearable. Donna emerged from the kitchen wearing her good apron and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sweetheart, how are you? You look thin. Are you eating enough? I worry about you in that little apartment, trying to cook for one." And there it was, less than 5 minutes in, and she'd already managed to imply that I was failing at basic self-care. "I'm eating fine, Mom. The apartment has a perfectly functional kitchen." "Oh, I'm sure it does," she said, settling into her chair with the careful movements of someone orchestrating a performance. "But there's something to be said for having space to really spread out. But room to entertain, maybe start thinking about the future." Harold cleared his throat in that particular way that meant he was about to launch into one of his prepared speeches. "Speaking of the future, Marlene, how's the property business going? Still buying and selling those little houses?" Little houses. I owned a 30-unit luxury complex, a mixed-use development, and was about to bid on a $12 million acquisition, but sure, let's call them little houses. "It's going well," I said, the same non-committal response I'd been giving for years. "Staying busy." "That's wonderful, dear," Donna said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. "But don't you think it might be time to consider something more stable? Maybe something with benefits, a pension plan? You're not getting any younger." Derek, who had been silently nursing a beer and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, suddenly perked up. "Real estate can be pretty volatile, right? I mean, what happens when the market crashes? Are you prepared for that kind of risk?" This was rich, coming from a man whose idea of financial planning was buying lottery tickets and hoping for the best. But I smiled politely and gave my standard response. "I've been fortunate so far." "Fortunate," Brielle repeated like she was tasting the word. "But luck doesn't last forever, does it? I mean, wouldn't it be nice to have something more concrete? Something you could really build a life on?" The conversation was starting to feel less like casual concern and more like a coordinated attack. I glanced around the room, noting the way they were all leaning forward slightly, watching my reactions with unusual intensity. "I suppose," I said carefully, "but I'm pretty happy with how things are going." "Are you, though?" Donna asked, and there was something almost predatory in her expression. "Really happy? Living alone in that tiny place, working all the time, no husband, no children. Don't you want more for yourself?" Here we go, I thought. The annual reminder that my life choices were fundamentally wrong because they didn't mirror Brielle's path of early marriage, immediate reproduction, and suburban contentment. "I'm quite content," I said, which was the understatement of the century. I was more than content. I was successful beyond their comprehension, financially independent, and building something meaningful. But explaining that would require revealing truths I wasn't ready to share. "Content," Harold mused, shaking his head. When I was your age, I was already thinking about legacy, about what I wanted to leave behind for my family." "Speaking of family," Brielle said, her voice taking on that syrupy sweet tone she used when she wanted something, "Derek and I have been doing a lot of thinking lately, about our future, about what's best for the kids. I had a sinking feeling I knew where this was headed. The thing is, Brielle continued, her hands fidgeting with her wedding ring in a way that usually meant she was nervous about something. We've been looking at our options, and, honestly, we're just not happy with our current situation. The house is fine, but it's not really suitable for the kind of family we're building. Derek nodded enthusiastically, like he'd been coached on his lines. The kids need more space, better schools, a neighborhood that reflects our values. We want to give them the best possible start in life. Of course you do, I said, wondering where this was leading and why it required my mother's special pot roast and everyone's formal attire. Donna leaned forward, her expression suddenly serious. The truth is, sweetheart, we've been talking as a family about how we can help each other, about how people with more resources should step up for those who need support. Resources? I almost laughed. You mean like Derek's management position at Sportsmart? No, Harold said, his voice taking on that stern tone he used when he thought he was delivering important life lessons. We mean like your apartment. The room went silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I looked around at their faces, trying to process what I was hearing. I'm sorry, what about my apartment? Brielle took a deep breath like she was preparing to deliver difficult news. Marlene, we know you have that lovely place downtown, the one with the view? And we were thinking, well, Derek and I really need something like that. Somewhere the children can grow up with culture and sophistication, you know? You want to buy my apartment? I asked, though something in their expressions told me that wasn't exactly what they had in mind. Not buy, exactly, Donna said carefully. More like a family arrangement, a way for you to really contribute to Brielle's future, to help her children have the opportunities they deserve. Harold cleared his throat again. The way we see it, Marlene, you're single. You don't have children. You don't really need all that space. But Brielle and Derek, they're building something important. They're carrying on the family legacy. I felt like I was listening to them speak a foreign language. You want me to give Brielle my apartment? We want you to do the right thing, Donna said, her voice taking on that particular edge she used when she thought I was being deliberately difficult. We want you to think about what's really important. Family comes first, Marlene, always. It would be temporary, Brielle added quickly, though her eyes said otherwise. Just until we get on our feet in a place that really suits our needs. We'd take excellent care of it, obviously. Temporary, I repeated flatly. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Look, Marlene, I know it's a big ask, but we'd really appreciate it. The kids love the idea of living downtown, and honestly, we could use the space for entertaining. My company's been talking about promoting me to regional manager, and we need somewhere that reflects our new status. I stared at him, marveling at the audacity. They wanted me to hand over my home, my beautiful, carefully chosen, perfectly located home that I'd saved for years to afford, so Derek could impress his sporting goods store colleagues. And what exactly would I get out of this arrangement, I asked. The question seemed to catch them off guard, like they hadn't considered that I might want something in return for giving up my home. You'd get the satisfaction of knowing you helped your family, Donna said, as if that were obvious. You'd get to be part of something bigger than yourself. Plus, Harold added, we'd let you stay in Brielle's old room here whenever you needed a place to sleep. It would be just like old times. Just like old times. They wanted me to give up my independence and move back into my childhood bedroom so that Brielle could upgrade her lifestyle. They wanted me to subsidize her dreams while abandoning my own. And if I say no? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Donna spoke, her voice colder than I'd ever heard it. Then I suppose we'd have to reconsider what family means to us. Whether someone who puts their own selfish desires ahead of their sister's needs really deserves to be part of this family at all. Harold nodded grimly. Sometimes, Marlene, you have to choose between being right and being family. We're hoping you'll make the choice that shows you really understand what matters. There it was. The ultimatum delivered with all the warmth of a tax audit. Give up everything I'd worked for, or be cast out of the family forever. I looked around the room at these people who shared my DNA, but had never really known me, who were asking me to sacrifice my entire life for their comfort while threatening to disown me if I refused. I need to think about this, I said finally. Of course, Brielle said, though her smile was sharp around the edges. But don't think too long. We were hoping to make the transition before the holidays. The transition before the holidays. They had it all planned out, down to the timeline. I sat there staring at my family. These people who had dismissed every achievement, minimized every success, and now wanted to literally take the roof over my head, and felt something cold and crystalline settling in my chest. You know what the really beautiful part of this is? I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You've spent my entire life telling me I'm not good enough, that my choices are wrong, that I'll never amount to anything. And now you want to take the one thing I've managed to build for myself. That's not fair, Marlene, Donna protested. We've always supported you. Supported me? I almost laughed. When you told me my tutoring business was cute but not realistic? When you said my scholarship was nice but not as impressive as Brielle making cheerleader? When you dismissed every property I bought as lucky timing? Now you're just being dramatic, Harold said, waving his hand dismissively. We're offering you a chance to do something meaningful with your life, to help your family, and you're acting like we're asking you to donate a kidney. You're asking me to donate my home. A home you don't even deserve, Brielle snapped, her mask of sweetness finally slipping. You live alone in all that space while my children are cramped in a house that's too small. It's selfish, Marlene. You've always been selfish. Selfish for working 3 jobs to afford my own place. Selfish for not asking you for money or help or validation. Selfish for... My phone rang, cutting through the tension like a blade. The caller ID showed Kevin's number, and normally I would have let it go to voicemail during family time. But something about this moment, the accusations, the ultimatum, the sheer audacity of their demands, made me want to answer it just to spite them. I need to take this, I said, standing up. Marlene, we're in the middle of an important conversation, Donna said sharply. So am I replied, swiping to answer. Kevin, what's up? Marlene, I'm sorry to bother you during family dinner, but I have news that couldn't wait. Kevin's voice was barely containing excitement. Phoenix Development Group accepted our offer, $10 million for the complex, but that's not even the big news. I could feel my family's eyes on me. Their conversation paused as they tried to eavesdrop. What's the big news? Sterling International called. They want to discuss acquiring your entire portfolio. All of it, Marlene. The Marlowe Lofts, the downtown high-rise, the Phoenix property we just bought. Everything. Their opening offer is $50 million. The room went completely silent. Even the grandfather clock seemed to stop ticking. 50 million, I repeated, just to make sure I'd heard correctly. 50 million, Kevin confirmed. And they said that's just their starting position. They think you're one of the most promising developers in the region, and they want to partner with you on a national expansion. Marlene, this could make you one of the biggest players in the country. I looked around the room at my family's faces. Donna's mouth was hanging open. Harold had gone completely pale. Derek looked like he'd been slapped. And Brielle was staring at me, like I'd just sprouted wings. Kevin, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, set up a meeting for tomorrow. I want to hear what they have to say. Already done, 10 a.m. at their downtown office. Marlene, congratulations, you've built something incredible. I hung up the phone and slowly sat back down, looking at each of their stunned faces in turn. The silence stretched for what felt like hours before Harold finally found his voice. $50 million? That's what the man said. Your portfolio? Donna whispered. You have a portfolio? Several, actually. Residential, commercial, mixed use. The apartment you want me to give to Brielle? It's the penthouse of a building I own. The entire building. Brielle's face had gone through several color changes, finally settling on a splotchy red. You own the building? Among others. The Marlowe Lofts downtown? That's mine too. Named after me, in fact. 30 units, fully leased, with a waiting list longer than your arm. Derek looked like he was having trouble processing the information. You're rich. I'm successful, I corrected. There's a difference. The room erupted into chaos as everyone started talking at once, but I held up my hand for silence. When they finally quieted down, I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd had all evening. "Now," I said, "let's talk about this family arrangement you had in mind." The transformation was immediate and nauseating. Suddenly, everyone was leaning forward with renewed interest, their previous dismissive attitudes evaporating like morning mist. Donna's hands were clasped together like she was praying. Harold was nodding approvingly as if my success had been his idea all along. And Brielle looked like she was recalculating every interaction we'd ever had. "Well," Harold said, clearing his throat and straightening his cardigan, "this certainly changes things, doesn't it? I always knew you had potential, Marlene, always said you were smart with money." "Did you?" I asked mildly. "Because 5 minutes ago you were questioning whether I could handle the volatility of real estate." Now, Donna interrupted, her voice taking on that sing-song tone she used when she was trying to smooth over awkward situations. "We were just concerned about your future, sweetheart, but clearly, you've been doing better than we realized." Clearly. Derek, who had been sitting there looking like someone had hit him with a 2x4, suddenly found his voice. "So when you said you were doing well in real estate, you meant you were really doing well?" "I meant exactly what I said. You just chose to interpret doing well as barely scraping by, because that fit the narrative you preferred." Brielle had been unusually quiet, but now she was looking at me with a mixture of awe and something that looked suspiciously like calculation. "Marlene, this is amazing. I had no idea you were so successful. We should celebrate. This is incredible news for the whole family." "For the whole family?" I repeated. "How exactly does my success benefit the whole family?" "Well," she said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she'd perfected as a child, "family shares with family, right? I mean, now that we know how well you're doing, maybe we could talk about that living arrangement from a different angle. Maybe we could work out some kind of partnership." "A partnership," I said. "Like the one where I give you my penthouse and you let me sleep in your old bedroom?" "That was before we knew about your situation," Harold said quickly. "Obviously, we'd need to reconsider the terms." "Obviously." I stood up slowly, looking around the room at these people who had just revealed themselves completely. "Let me make sure I understand what's happening here. 5 minutes ago, I was the family failure who needed to sacrifice everything for Brielle's children. Now that you know I'm worth $50 million, suddenly I'm someone whose success belongs to the whole family." "That's not what we're saying," Donna protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" I picked up my purse, noting how their eyes followed my movements with new intensity. "For 34 years, you've made it clear that my choices were wrong, my priorities were misguided, and my achievements were either luck or irrelevant. You've celebrated Brielle's mediocrity while dismissing my actual success. And tonight you invited me to dinner to demand that I give up my home to subsidize her lifestyle." "We were trying to help the family," Harold said weakly. "You were trying to help yourselves. And the most pathetic part is that you still don't understand what you've done." I walked toward the door, then turned back to face them. "You spent decades convincing yourselves that I was the problem, that I was selfish and difficult and disappointing. You never once considered that maybe I wasn't the failure. Maybe you were just too limited to recognize success when it didn't look like your narrow definition." "Marlene, please," Brielle said, standing up with tears in her eyes that I was pretty sure were calculated for maximum effect. "We're family. Family forgives each other. Maybe we made some mistakes, but we can work through this." "Family," I repeated. "You know what family does, Brielle? Family celebrates each other's victories. Family offers support during struggles. Family doesn't wait until someone is worth $50 million to start showing interest in their life." "But we always cared about you," Donna said desperately. "We just wanted what was best for you." "No, you wanted what was best for Brielle. You always have, and that's fine. Parents are allowed to have favorites. But don't insult my intelligence by pretending this conversation would be happening if Kevin hadn't called with that news." I opened the door, feeling the cool October air on my face like a promise of freedom. "Where are you going?" Harold asked, panic creeping into his voice. "Back to my penthouse," I said. "The one I earned through years of work that you dismissed as a hobby. The one that's in the building I own, in the company I built, in the life I created without any help or encouragement or even basic acknowledgement from any of you. Marlene, wait, Brielle called out, following me to the door. We can fix this. We can be better. Money doesn't have to change anything between us. I paused on the threshold and looked back at her. Really looked at her. For just a moment, I saw the sister I'd wanted to have, the family I'd dreamed of belonging to. Then I remembered every dismissive comment, every celebration I'd watched from the sidelines, every time they'd made me feel small for dreaming big. You're right, I said. Money doesn't change anything, it just reveals what was already there. I drove straight to Luna's Bistro, the small restaurant where my real family gathered every Tuesday night. Not the family that shared my DNA, but the people who had celebrated my victories, supported me through setbacks, and never once made me feel like I had to earn their respect. Rosa Martinez was already there, sitting at our usual corner table with a glass of wine and her laptop open, probably reviewing another investment proposal. She looked up as I approached, took one look at my face, and immediately closed the computer. That bad? She asked, gesturing for me to sit. Worse. I slumped into the chair across from her, feeling the weight of the evening settling into my bones. They wanted me to give Brielle my penthouse, as a family arrangement. Rosa's eyebrows shot up. Your penthouse? The one you designed yourself? The one in the building you own? That's the one. Apparently I don't deserve it because I'm single and childless, while Brielle needs it to reflect their new status when Derek gets promoted to regional manager at Sportsmart. Jesus, Rosa muttered, shaking her head. What did you tell them? I was about to tell them exactly where they could shove their family arrangement when Kevin called with the Sterling International news. Rosa's expression shifted from sympathy to excitement. The acquisition offer? What did they say? 50 million, starting offer. Rosa stared at me for a moment, then threw back her head and laughed. The kind of full-bodied laugh that drew looks from other tables. Oh, honey, please tell me they heard that conversation. Every word. You should have seen their faces, Rosa. It was like watching people discover gravity in real time. And then what happened? Then they suddenly remembered how much they've always believed in me and wanted to discuss new partnership opportunities. Before Rosa could respond, Marcus Chen appeared at our table, still wearing his architect's blazer and carrying a portfolio under his arm. Marcus had been my design partner on 4 projects, including the Marlowe Lofts, and had become one of my closest friends in the process. Sorry I'm late, he said, settling into his usual chair. Client meeting ran long. Some people think luxury means throw marble at everything until it looks expensive. He paused, studying my expression. What happened? You look like someone stole your favorite blueprint. Family dinner, Rosa explained succinctly. Ah. Marcus signaled the waitress for his usual coffee. Scale of 1 to 10, how badly did they disappoint you this time? They asked her to give Brielle her penthouse, Rosa said. For free. Marcus nearly choked on the water he'd just sipped. Your penthouse? The one with the custom kitchen and the rooftop garden? The one where you hosted that amazing party after we closed the Phoenix deal? The very same? But that's... He paused, processing. That's insane. That place is worth at least $2 million on its own, never mind the sentimental value. Sentimental value doesn't matter when you're just the selfish sister who doesn't deserve nice things, I said, surprised by how bitter my voice sounded. Kevin appeared at our table like he'd been summoned, sliding into the remaining chair with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged. Sorry, traffic was murder. Did you tell them about Sterling? She told us about Sterling, Marcus said. But first, tell him about the penthouse situation. As Kevin's expression grew increasingly horrified while I recounted the evening's events, I realized something that made the whole toxic dinner feel less devastating. These people were genuinely outraged on my behalf, not because they wanted something from me, not because they were calculating how my success might benefit them, but because they cared about me as a person. That's unconscionable, Kevin said when I finished. They've been dismissing your work for years, and now they want to take your home? The best part, Rosa added, is that they threatened to disown her if she said no. Which would be a blessing at this point, Marcus muttered. Marlene, these people don't deserve you. They never have. I looked around the table at these three people who had watched me build my empire from the ground up. Rosa, who had taken a chance on financing my first major project when banks wouldn't even return my calls. Marcus, who had worked weekends and late nights to help bring my visions to life. Kevin, who had started as my assistant and become my business partner, handling deals worth millions with the same attention he gave to ordering office supplies. You know what the strangest part is? I said. Sitting here with you guys, I realize I haven't felt like I was missing anything. I thought I needed their approval to feel successful. But I've been successful all along. I just couldn't see it while I was still trying to win their game. Their game was rigged from the start, Rosa said gently. Some people can only feel good about themselves by making others feel small. Well, Kevin said, raising his coffee cup in a mock toast, here's to not playing rigged games anymore. The next morning, I woke up in my penthouse to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The digital avalanche had started around midnight and continued through dawn, a desperate symphony of family members who had apparently spent the entire night discussing strategies for damage control. Donna's messages started apologetic and escalated to accusatory. Sweetheart, I think we all got a little emotional last night. Family dinners can be stressful. Let's talk when everyone's calmer. Followed 2 hours later by, Marlene, it's not fair to cut off communication when we're trying to work things out. This is very hurtful. Harold's approach was more direct. Call me, we need to discuss this situation like adults. Then, your mother is very upset. Is this really how you want to handle family disagreements? But Brielle's messages were the most revealing. They started with damage control. I'm so sorry about last night, I think there was a misunderstanding about what we were asking. Then shifted to justification. You have to understand, Derek and I are just trying to do what's best for our children. And finally landed on manipulation. The kids keep asking why Aunt Marlene doesn't love them anymore. How do I explain that? I deleted every message without responding and immediately called my lawyer. Janet, it's Marlene. I need to discuss some boundary-setting measures. Janet Kowalski had been handling my legal affairs for 3 years, ever since the Marlowe Lofts project required more complex contracts than I could manage alone. She was brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and had the rare ability to make legal protections feel like warm hugs. What's going on? She asked, and I could hear the click of her keyboard as she opened a new file. I gave her the condensed version of the previous night's events, watching the sunrise paint my city in gold and orange, while I explained how my family had tried to appropriate my success for their own purposes. Jesus, Janet said when I finished. So they want to steal your home and threaten to disown you when you hesitated? That's the gist of it. And now they're love-bombing you with calls and texts because they realized you're actually successful? $50 million successful, according to Sterling International. Congratulations, by the way. But let's talk protection. What do you want to do here? I want to establish clear boundaries that they can't cross, manipulate, or lawyer their way around. I want to cut off their access to information about my business and personal life, and I want documentation of everything in case this escalates. Smart. Let's start with the basics. We'll draft a formal cease and desist letter requesting no further contact unless it's in writing and goes through my office. That creates a paper trail and forces them to think before they react emotionally. What about family gatherings? Holidays? That's your choice. We can specify that you're declining all family events indefinitely, or we can say you'll only attend if certain conditions are met. What feels right to you? I thought about it while watching the city wake up below me. Delivery trucks navigating narrow streets, early commuters hurrying toward train stations, the whole machinery of urban life that I'd helped shape and improve through my developments. I think I'm done with their version of family gatherings, I said finally. I've got my own traditions now. Then we'll make that clear. What about business information? Do you want to prevent them from accessing details about your companies? Absolutely. I don't want them knowing about acquisitions, property values, or client relationships. This is my business, not a family asset they can claim. Janet was typing rapidly. I'll draft an NDA that covers anyone who might have business dealings with you. If they start fishing for information from your contractors, employees, or partners, they'll be violating a legal agreement. Is that enforceable? Very. Especially since they've already demonstrated intent to appropriate your assets for their personal use. A judge would see this as reasonable protection. My phone started ringing again, Harold this time. I declined the call and immediately blocked his number. I'm blocking their phone numbers, I told Janet. If they want to communicate, they can do it through you. Perfect. That gives us documentation and prevents them from wearing you down with constant contact. What about showing up at your properties? Can we prevent that legally? We can establish that they're not welcome on any of your properties and that their presence would constitute trespassing. I'll send formal notices to building security and property managers. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt like I could breathe properly. These weren't just boundaries, they were walls. Strong, professionally constructed walls that would protect everything I'd built from people who saw my success as their opportunity. Janet, one more thing. If they try to claim that family relationships give them some kind of legal right to my assets, they don't. Family members have no inherent claim to each other's property unless specified in legal documents like wills or business partnerships. Your assets are yours. Period. 2 weeks after establishing my legal fortress, I was sitting in the conference room of the Marlene Chen Foundation. Yes, I'd legally changed my middle name to honor Marcus, the first person who had truly seen my vision. Reviewing applications for our inaugural affordable housing initiative. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was using my family's dismissive legacy to create something meaningful for people who actually needed help. This application from the Rodriguez family is heartbreaking, said Sarah Williams, the foundation's director and former nonprofit executive Aropoli. I'd recruited specifically for her expertise in community development. Single mother, 3 kids, been on the affordable housing waiting list for 4 years. She's working 2 jobs but still can't afford anything decent in the city. I reviewed Maria Rodriguez's file, noting the familiar struggle of someone working incredibly hard but trapped by a system that made homeownership nearly impossible for working-class families. It reminded me of my own early years, except Maria was dealing with children and systemic barriers I'd never faced. Approved, I said, stamping the application. Let's get her into one of the Riverdale units. The Riverdale project was my pride and joy, a mixed-income development that reserved 40% of its units for families earning less than 60% of the area median income. Unlike typical affordable housing that segregated low-income families into isolated complexes, Riverdale integrated affordable units seamlessly into a community that included market-rate homes, green spaces, and amenities that every resident could enjoy. The waiting list is already at 300 families, Sarah noted. We're going to need more properties. I'm working on it. And I was. The Sterling International Partnership had given me access to capital and resources I'd never dreamed of, but more importantly, it had given me the credibility to convince other developers to include affordable components in their projects. My phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. Channel 7 wants to interview you about the foundation. Interested? I considered it. 6 months ago, I would have avoided media attention at all costs, partly from habit, and partly because I wasn't ready for my family to fully understand the scope of what I'd built. Now, with legal boundaries firmly in place and a mission that mattered more than family politics, publicity could actually serve my goals. Set it up, I texted back. The interview aired 3 days later, a 5-minute segment about local developer making housing dreams reality. They showed footage of the Riverdale project, interviewed Maria Rodriguez in her new 3-bedroom apartment, and ended with me explaining the foundation's mission. Too many people think affordable housing means substandard housing, I said to the reporter. We're proving that everyone deserves beautiful, sustainable homes in thriving communities. When we invest in people, we invest in the future of our cities. The segment ended with my contact information for the foundation and a mention of the Chen Family Foundation, the name I'd chosen deliberately to honor the family that had actually supported my vision. Within hours, my foundation's website had crashed from traffic. Applications poured in from families across the region. 3 other developers called about potential partnerships, and my phone started ringing with numbers I recognized but refused to answer. The voicemails were predictably revealing. "Sweetheart, we saw you on television. We're so proud of you. Maybe we could meet for lunch and discuss how the family might support your wonderful charity work." "Marlene, that was quite an impressive interview. Perhaps we should talk about how to properly manage this kind of publicity for maximum family benefit." And Brielle, "Oh my God, Marlene, I had no idea you were doing such important work. The kids would love to be involved somehow. Maybe we could do a photo shoot with them at one of your properties?" I deleted each message without listening to the end. But the call that mattered came from Marcus, his voice warm with pride. "I saw the interview. You know what the best part was? You looked genuinely happy, like you were finally doing exactly what you were meant to do." He was right. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't building something to prove my worth to people who would never appreciate it. I was building because I had the resources and vision to solve real problems for people who deserved better. The Chen Family Foundation had given me something my biological family never could: a legacy worth claiming. Every family that moved into affordable housing, every community garden we funded, every after-school program we supported was proof that success meant more than accumulating wealth. It meant using that wealth to lift others up. I was finally living up to a name that meant something, surrounded by people who understood that true family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about shared values and mutual support. The family name I was building would last longer than any penthouse, and it would matter more than any inheritance. A year after that disastrous family dinner, I was standing on my rooftop garden at sunset, surveying a city I'd helped transform. The skyline was dotted with projects I'd developed or influenced. The Marlowe Lofts, with its distinctive red brick facade, the Riverdale Mixed Income Community, with its innovative green design, and 3 new affordable housing complexes that bore the Chen Family Foundation logo. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "The Morrison family just got their keys. That's 100 families housed this year." 100 families. 100 fresh starts, stable foundations, communities where children could thrive. I'd built something that mattered, something that would outlast any family drama or personal vendetta. The legal boundaries Janet had established were holding perfectly. After 6 months of my family's attempts to circumvent the cease and desist order, showing up at my office building, contacting my business partners, even trying to reach me through the foundation, they'd finally accepted that I was serious about the separation. The last contact had been 3 months ago, a formal letter from their lawyer requesting a family meeting to discuss mutual interests. Janet had responded with a polite but firm decline. I didn't miss them, which surprised me. For decades I'd carried this low-level anxiety about their approval, this constant background noise of wanting to prove myself worthy of their love. The silence was initially unsettling, like when a chronic pain suddenly stops and you realize how much energy it was consuming just to manage it. What I discovered in that silence was something I'd never expected. I didn't need their validation because I'd already validated myself. Every successful project, every family housed, every innovative solution to urban development challenges was proof that I'd chosen the right path. Not because it impressed anyone else, but because it aligned with my values and utilized my talents in meaningful ways. Marcus had been right during our conversation last month. You know what's different about you now? You're not building to prove anything anymore. You're building because you love it. And I did love it. I loved the complexity of turning vacant lots into thriving communities. I loved the challenge of making affordable housing profitable enough to attract other developers. I loved the moment when families got their keys and realized they were finally home. The Sterling International Partnership had evolved beyond a simple acquisition. They'd made me their head of sustainable development for the entire East Coast, with a mandate to replicate the Riverdale model in 12 cities over the next 5 years. The work was exactly what I'd always dreamed of doing: large-scale urban development that prioritized people over pure profit. My chosen family had grown too. Rosa had become my closest advisor and closest friend, the person I called when I needed to talk through complex decisions or celebrate major victories. Marcus was designing a revolutionary net-zero housing complex that would serve as a prototype for climate-conscious affordable development. Kevin had evolved from assistant to full partner, handling the business operations that allowed me to focus on vision and strategy. We still gathered at Luna's Bistro every Tuesday, but now our conversations were about scaling impact, managing growth, and planning initiatives that could affect thousands of lives. We'd created our own traditions: foundation galas, project groundbreakings, quiet celebrations when families moved into their new homes. The penthouse that Brielle had wanted to claim was now the place where I hosted fundraising dinners for housing advocates, strategy sessions with city planners, and intimate gatherings with the people who shared my vision of what cities could become. Every room told the story of work I'd chosen, relationships I'd built, and values I'd never compromised. Standing there as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I realized that the most valuable thing I'd inherited from my family wasn't their approval. It was their dismissal. Their consistent underestimation had forced me to build something entirely my own, to create value that didn't depend on their recognition or validation. I'd learned that family isn't always about blood. Success isn't always about wealth, and worth isn't something anyone else can give you or take away. It's something you build, day by day, choice by choice, until you look around and realize you've created a life that reflects exactly who you are and what you believe. The peace I felt wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the presence of purpose. I'd finally stopped trying to fit into someone else's definition of success and started living my own. Have you ever felt like you were constantly trying to prove your worth to people who seemed determined not to see it? Like you were speaking a different language from the family that was supposed to understand you best? My journey from family disappointment to successful developer taught me something crucial. Sometimes the people who dismiss your dreams are actually doing you a favor. Their rejection forces you to build something entirely your own, something that can't be diminished by anyone else's opinion. The hardest part wasn't walking away from their demands for my penthouse. It was walking away from the need for their approval. But once I did, I discovered something extraordinary. I'd already built the life I wanted. I just couldn't see it while I was still looking for validation from people who were never going to give it. If my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. Drop a comment and tell me about a time you had to choose between pleasing others and staying true to yourself. I read every comment, and your stories inspire me to keep sharing mine. Remember, your worth isn't determined by family approval, societal expectations, or anyone else's narrow definition of success. It's determined by how well you honor your own values, use your talents, and create positive impact in the world. Sometimes the best thing your family can do for you is underestimate you. It forces you to prove them wrong by building something they never could have imagined. You don't need anyone's permission to dream big and build the life you actually want.